You're listening to the Dudes and Dads Podcast, a show dedicated to helping men be better dudes and dads by building community through meaningful conversation and storytelling. And now, here are your hosts, Joel DeMott and Andy Lehman.
We are back for Season 2, Episode 2, Joel. We are here.
Andy, the fun just keeps rolling in.
It does. It's not been a long time since we recorded the last episode. It was only a few days, but we're back in studio.
Are we just being more responsible podcast recorders in the new year? Is that what's happening?
Something like that.
Did we have a New Year's resolution that we didn't really talk about, but we're sort of living
we
into
are
now?
I think so.
It could be.
We're recording quicker these days.
So good. So good.
But we're recording quicker this time because our guest today made it all the way. He made a 2-hour trip to come in the studio.
And by the way, it is rainy and nasty. I think we're going to get some flooding, and he just traveled up through all of that. This is the time of year when I live in Indiana, and I go, why?
Yeah, why am I here?
Why?
It's rainy one day, it's snowy the next, and then it's like short weather again.
Yeah, and this has been an unnaturally warm.
It has.
And
in
so
winter.
it's just kind of it's the gloom and the rain and it's 54 degrees out right now, and it's in January. I don't know, guys. I'm not going to get into a climate change discussion here, but something seems off, at least right now. Anyway.
My only hope is that by winter camp
That's
in
right.
February that there's lots and lots of snow.
Oh my gosh, just a little snow, maybe a good drop of like a foot. If we got that in southern Michigan,
it'd be great.
So we can take those middle schoolers out and just shove them down the hill.
We're good.
Oh boy. Now you got me all excited about that too. Good.
Well, today, or you're normally recording tonight. Today, our guest is Cody Chaplin, and I'm actually going to let him do this segment.
What's brewing? What's brewing? What's brewing? What's brewing?
And the reason I'm going to let him do it is because he said when we were scheduling the episode, he said, I want to come to your studio, and I want to bring my coffee and brew it for you.
And we said, sir, we don't know what angel you are. We don't know what the patron saint of coffee is. I'm sure someone could tell us. But it sounds like you have aligned with these forces. And so please come and bless us with your delicious brew.
So, Cody, welcome to the show. And
Thank you.
Tell us what we're drinking today.
Today we are drinking a light roast from a company called Copper Moon, which is locally in Lafayette, Indiana, which is where my wife and I live. And it's an Ethiopian Sedima, really light, clean, delicious. It's my favorite from the Copper Moon. We brew it in a Chemex.
Yes.
At 900 grams of water.
Beautiful.
45 grams of coffee.
Yes, Lord, preach.
And boiling point. So, it's delicious, and it's my favorite.
It's just super well balanced. I like the finish is clean. But you say a light roast. It's not what I would normally think of on a lighter roast because it does have a full body, like it has a full body of flavor to it. It doesn't feel like you're not getting a mouthful of smoke per se, but you're definitely
there's no film left at the end.
Filmless coffee, which is a great thing.
It is. And I mean, we've never had a Chemex brewed coffee on the show. So,
Andy, I'm going to just say
I'm a coffee snob and nerd.
Yeah,
so
I'm just going to say I'm going to have to look into some things. I'm going to reconsider what I've been doing with my life here.
Reconsider your hobbies.
Although I should say I did get an AeroPress for just because I'm the only coffee drinker in my home, and so the AeroPress has come in handy for that one cup, situation. It works out well. But other than that, this whole process is just beautiful.
And I love the AeroPress as well because it's a mixture of saturation process like the like the French press, but then you also get to press it out.
That's right.
Like a shot of espresso.
That's right.
It's another clean finish.
Yeah.
Without the grit of the French press.
Zero grit.
Yes. And I'm drinking it out of my new Dudes and Dads podcast.
Oh boy.
Coffee cup.
Which, Andy, where can you find the wonderful Dudes and Dads coffee mug?
You can find it over at dudesanddadspodcast.com/store.
Beautiful.
On the back it says what's brewing, just for this segment. So
yeah, and you've updated the graphics on some of our other merchandise, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, some of it.
And so Andy and I are going to be donning the official the new Dudes and Dads hoodies soon. So we're looking forward to that. And if we really got our act together, let's just say, Cody, we're going to send you some sort of merch. People that come on the show, we should actually send them something because.
Well, loving coffee, a coffee mug would be awesome.
Yeah, he brought all the goodness to us. Golly.
That would be great.
Man, I'm just feeling blessed this morning. Just this coffee is making my day.
It is.
In the gloom and the doom.
All right. Well, again, we brought Cody on today because he's got a great story. It's one, though, that just as a kind of a word of warning that we're going to put out here. Since we do have a wide range of audiences, this may not be a topic for kids, for younger kids. It deals with some more adult-type themes. And so just kind of a word of warning, you may not want to have your kids listen to this show.
I know for me, I oftentimes listen to podcasts. Well, it sometimes is in the in-ear, and then it's sometimes, just like broadcast out in the living room as we're doing other stuff. And, my kids are walking around. So we're just trying to be, we're not going X-rated here, but we are trying to be sensitive, like Andy said, to the fact that
you never know who's listening.
We don't know who's listening. So, but we're grateful for every single one of you. Thank you.
So, Cody, welcome to the show. And we first want to have you tell us your dad stats. We like to ask our listeners dad stats. So tell us just about who you are, what makes you a dad, and, well, I know what makes you a dad.
Yeah. Well, we're really going to get into the...
If you could really tell us how you became a dad. No.
Listener discretion advised.
No.
So my name is Cody Chaplin. I'm 35. I got married to my wife, Cassie, in 2009, April 18th, 2009. And then a year later, we had our first son, Liam, who is he's turning 9 this month, January 27th. And then we had our second son, Thalen, who is 6 in New Zealand. Our third child, Clara, who is 4. We had her in New Zealand. And our fourth child, Rayowen, who is 3. And we had her in New Zealand as well.
How does citizenship work?
It doesn't really in New Zealand. You have to be a natural-born citizen or a resident. And
Gotcha.
We were neither. So all of our kids have certificate of birth abroad, and a New Zealand birth certificate.
Okay.
So.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So they are full-blooded Americans.
Gotcha.
By paper.
Gotcha.
And by blood.
Gotcha. So you had reached out to us. Tell us a little bit about your story, and we may interject in here asking you some questions, but if you want to just go ahead and start with your story for us.
Yeah. So I grew up in a home with awesome parents. I had 2 older sisters, and things were in different places all my life. So I was involved in a case where my babysitter molested me as a child, really young. Didn't remember until I was like in 5th or 6th grade, but I remembered it vividly. I remember the pictures of like in my brain what happened. But then that was a confusing time too, because people are like, that was so long ago. Did it really happen? Are you just trying to get attention? That kind of thing. When I turned 8, my parents split up. They got a divorce. And then about a year and a half later, they both got remarried to their significant other now, and a week apart. So I got 2 new parents within a week.
Wow.
So not only was I just an angry kid because my parents were splitting up, and then I got 2 new parents, and I can tell you now that I love those step parents. Like my life would not be the same without them. So I'm very thankful for them. With my dad and stepmom, I got another sister, a half sister, who it's weird to call her a half sister because we just grew up together. But I am 10 years older than her, and I was the baby of my parents, so the youngest of 3. So yeah, my story really starts, I think, when my grandfather was a pastor for a little country church in Indiana somewhere. I don't even remember what city it was. And he planted a church in my hometown, and very faithful. He was my step-grandpa, but I only knew him as grandpa. So he was awesome. He was a musician and a pastor, and he always told us about Jesus, but I was kind of I was angry, so I didn't really care. I went to church with them as a little kid and, memorized things that they asked me to memorize, but I never really believed anything. And then when he passed away, my grandma, he supported like 90 kids to go to school in India. And so they dedicated a library to him, and they wanted my grandma to come over. So my grandma asked me if I'd go with her, and I was like, sure. As a 12-year-old kid, that's
Right, you get to travel.
I get to travel. Well, I mean, I never thought about traveling because I grew up in a small town where no one leaves.
Oh, okay.
But that's when the bug hit me, when I went and I saw the world outside of my small world, very white community, very non-different people in my hometown.
Mhm.
And so went to India. It was an experience that I'll never forget because, you know, there's a bajillion people in India, and people just stand right next to you and go to the bathroom. And so as a 12-year-old, not even comfortable with my own setup, I had to witness other people
Gotcha,
and
yeah.
going to the bathroom. And so that was very interesting. And then my grandma spent a lot of time like showing me like, here's the women going to the well, like the Bible stories, and, you know, oh, great, grandma, cool. You know,
Mhm.
thanks for sharing that. Like, still just very turned off. But
Mhm.
not that I was like turned off to the truth. I just didn't care,
Mhm.
if that makes sense. But that was the catalyst, I think, to where God started really pounding and like wooing me, as Matt Chandler would say, wooing me back to himself. And so, but of course, came home from India, changed because my worldly view was changed, and it was no longer just McDonald's and, you know, people that look like me. There's other people in the world. And so that really challenged who I was as a person and what I wanted to do. And when I got into middle school, that was middle school, but middle school is where I was introduced to pornography. And that I think that tainted everything.
Mhm.
That's where but, you know, when you're not a Christian, you don't know, you don't really you believe a God exists, but you don't know the Savior and the gospel of Jesus, then, you know, things that are enticing you dive into. So
Mhm.
started looking at pornography when I was in 7th grade with one of my friends. We watched videos all the time. Started smoking weed probably even before that. I think I started smoking weed younger than that. But yeah, really, I didn't really get into heavy drugs. I think weed was the only thing I really did. I did acid once, but I didn't like it. I'm a black and white logical person, so like I like boundaries and I like consistency. And so when I would do anything that would create a non-consistent mind frame,
Yeah.
I would really struggle,
Yeah.
and I was super paranoid about everything. And
Yeah.
so I never really liked it, but I liked doing things with people because I liked the community of it. And so I was really drawn to the community, not so much the effect of the drug. And so that was a weird time for me trying to figure that out. But and then when I was 15, I broke my leg, and I wrecked a moped, and that really slowed me down because I've been a musician most of my life. I started playing drums when I was 10 or 11, and play like that was my God. That's all I did. I played drums all the time. And so I went to, I got into the high school band as a 13-year-old in the drum line, and one of the first to do that. And that was how I defined myself. That was my identity.
Gotcha.
I found out who I was by my placement was in regards to people understanding how good of a drummer I was.
Gotcha.
And then the drum line, there's a lot of guys on the drum line that introduced me to different types of pornography that wasn't just like the late night thing on Showtime where it was just you didn't see much, but it was the more graphic stuff. And so really dove into that hard in high school. But then it was weird. It's like right after high school, I graduated and I went to this program. Oh, hang on, I skipped a step. I need to go back. Right in the middle of high school, I was involved in a car accident, which is probably, I really think, God's wake-up call in my life.
Okay.
I hit the windshield of my mom, and I were driving down the road, and someone basically head-on collision, and I hit the windshield at 70 miles an hour and went home that night.
Wow.
And so, I mean, I had some lacerations and 3 plastic surgeries to get to where I'm at now, but I didn't have a concussion, didn't have broken bones or anything like that. So, but that, I really feel like that was the moment because the youth pastor that my mom's church had came over to my house. He was brand new, just got hired, and he thought like I had almost been decapitated or
Oh,
something.
man.
Oh, man.
And so,
Yeah.
you know, he was freaking out, having to come to my house. This kid just got in a car accident, smashed his face, and shows up and like, yeah, it was gruesome. There was a lot of blood and stuff, but it wasn't like
Your
as
head
bad
was
as-
still on.
Yeah,
Right.
my head was still on, no stitches around the neckline, so he was pretty cool. And then he was super intentional,
Okay.
just always involved and just getting me to do things with the group. And so I started going to church then. Still didn't really believe, or at least didn't confess to believe, but I hung out with everyone. I really enjoyed it. I liked boundaries, and so, you know, and it was a very legalistic church, so it was easy to, you know, oh, I'm doing right. I'm not a bad person because I'm doing these things. And so, and then he took me to like a Christian teen convention thing, and I felt like the speaker was talking about how he was in a car accident and this was God's wake up call, and I was like, oh, this
You're like
is
ding ding ding.
yeah, like this is
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
And so I, you know, went up front and said the prayer, not knowing really what that meant, but said the prayer that I did believe that Jesus was real,
Mhm.
and I believed in God. I feel like I've always believed in God, but Satan believes in God. That's the
Right.
reality. Is that
Right,
is like,
right.
that's not enough. Like you
Right.
have to believe in the Son. So, so I learned about Jesus. Started going to church a lot more often, but it was super legalistic. So everything I did was based on legalism. I don't drink. I don't smoke anymore. I don't have sex before marriage. Blah blah blah. I don't cuss, and that made me a Christian.
Mhm.
And that's what I thought was right. And so I started beating the crap out of people with that legalism.
Gotcha.
Instead of the grace and hope of Jesus, I always just beat them down. And so when I graduated high school, I was this Bible thumper in a sense. And then I didn't want to go to college. I never really wanted to go to college. Plus my high school counselor told me I was not really the smartest guy to go to college. He's like, I don't
Thanks,
think you're smart enough to go to school. So, which I was like, sweet, I don't have to go now. My counselor told me I don't have to. So, graduated college, started looking around. I was in a million different bands, punk rock bands, blah, blah, blah. And that was community. Again, I loved the community of it. And something happened where I applied to go to some missionary came and talked at this church I was attending in Greenwood, Indiana. And it was with a group called YWAM.
Okay.
And they were in Australia, and I was like, yeah, man, this sounds exactly right up my alley. I didn't know anything about YWAM. I just knew that like I wanted to do something, and I felt the call to missions. And so I like signed up like right there, like give me the paperwork, and was ready to go down under, you know what I mean? And
Mhm.
didn't know anything about Australia or anything. So signed up with YWAM, and but didn't end up going. My grandma came to me and said, there's this another program that just came through our church, and I really feel like God is telling me to tell you to go here. And so I was like, oh, okay, let's look into it. And I met with like the director person, and I was like, how much is it to go? And he was like, oh, it's this cost. And I had just received like one payment from my settlement for my car accident,
Mhm.
and it was like the exact amount.
Oh,
I was
cool.
like,
Yeah.
okay, this is the way it's supposed to go. So I went, and which is where I met Andy's parents, Chuck and Becca Lehman. It was a program called Deeper Discipleship Training Institute. We did a couple weeks of in-class training, spiritual disciplines, very, very, very brief view of like Greek and Hebrew and intro to Old Testament, and just a lot of training. And then we went and did like 5 or 6 weeks out on the road, and we just visited different missionaries or different church plants and other things. And some really cool stories come from that. Jonathan and Jared were the other guys in this group with me, and there was 4 of the girls. And when we were going throughout America, like we ended up going to a Filipino house church in New York, and Jared's best friend from high school passed away while we were there.
Oh, wow.
He had a heart condition.
Yeah.
And Jared is he's one of my best friends now. At the time, he was really difficult because he's a lot slower pace, and I'm a very fast-paced person and impatient. I'm an impatient person, and so the Lord sent me people like Jared to kind of, you know, iron sharpens iron type of thing. And so we had to tell Jared, we were like, your dad needs to call you. And Jared's from Massachusetts, And so Jared learns that his friend passed away, and Jared doesn't know how to deal with it well. And so, like, we're in the middle of this Filipino house church, and Jared just runs outside in the middle of the Bronx. It's like 8:30 at night, and just screams.
Oh.
Just screaming like crazy, snot running down his face, sobbing his eyes out. And this drunk guy passes and sees Jared screaming and walks up and like puts his hand on his back and like grabs the snot off his face and flings it off onto the ground and wipes his face off. And like, what's wrong with this guy? And we're like, he just found out his best friend died and blah, blah, blah. And then you could tell he was this blitzed. He was gone. He was just, I mean, he was a young guy, probably in early 20s. I don't know where he was from, but so he starts asking, like, what is this place? And your dad goes, oh, it's a church. You should come in and be with us. And the guy came in.
Wow.
And I took Jared down in the basement, like shoved his face in the pillow because he was screaming. I was like trying to keep him quiet as best I could. And this guy came in and heard the truth. And like, I don't know if it was real or not, but he heard the truth, like walked up and was like, I am screaming on the inside like that guy is screaming on the outside. And so even in like the turmoil of Jared's grief, it was a way that God used to bring him into it. And so I pray that that really planted a seed and that he came to the Lord.
Yeah.
But yeah, so throughout Deeper, we went around and then we did 4.5 months in a foreign culture. And so Jared and John and I lived in the Czech Republic for almost 5 months. And that was very, very hard to live with 2 other guys in a country where you don't speak the language. Czech is probably the second hardest language in the world. And it took me all 5 months to learn how to say the number 4, and I still can't say it right. But Czech people are very closed off. They don't talk. You get on the foreigners are the ones on the metros and the buses that are talking. Like Czech people don't.
Yeah.
But there's a code and an ethic code that's ingrained in that culture where, like, if an older woman or an older man comes in, you get up and give him your seat. If a mom's getting on with like her pram or a stroller, then you help her get it on there and you give her your seat. And like but no one says anything. They just do it. And so we're like learning Czech. I'm like holding this book and I'm saying these words, trying to learn as much as I can. It was impossible to learn, to be honest. For 5 months, I wasted my time because I don't have the mouth to say some of the words. But so I'm saying it, and this little old lady came up and she starts talking and she starts pointing and she would say it, which is huge because they don't
help you.
They don't like they're they used to be a communist country, and so you just keep to yourself. You mind your own business, and so that was just cool to see how God was working that way. Fast forward a little bit. While we were there in the Czech Republic, the missionary's wife was deaf, and so I started learning sign language because I've always interested in sign language. When my parents split up, I feel like I had a psychological something happened in my brain, and I couldn't hear. I didn't lose my hearing. I just lost the ability to hear properly, and I don't know how to explain it any other way. Like, it's almost like tunnel vision, but with hearing. So I could hear directly outside of me, like right straight. But if you were standing in front of me or behind me, it sounded like Charlie Brown's teacher.
Gotcha.
So I started learning sign language and with her, and got pretty good at it, and decided, maybe I'm supposed to go into missions or into the ministry with deaf people. So I started looking at colleges and stuff like that, because now I wanted to go to college for some reason. I was like, well, I should go to a Christian college. That's great. And the supporting, or the Indian church that my grandpa supported, the missionaries that were there, their daughter, Shiny Law, she was at Ozark Christian College. And I knew of her. And it's the only Christian college I knew of, besides KCC, which is where John went, the guy that was in my group, who left because he hated the legalism of it.
Gotcha.
So he had some bitterness there, and so I didn't want to go there. And so I was like, well, maybe I'll apply for OCC, and signed up and got accepted because I had a pulse, and they accept anyone, basically. So I went to OCC, did a 2-year stint there, learning sign language, very involved in the deaf community, but that is where pornography stepped back in and heavily. My first semester, I was a very emo kid. I had I have bright blonde hair, and I had this like black streak almost like a reverse skunk.
Gotcha.
And I was in an emo band and screaming for an emo band, and it was
emo.
yeah, the long bangs, you flip over and Justin Bieber flip, and I was alone. I didn't really have real community. My roommate and I were really, really close friends, but not like surface. It was very surface.
Gotcha.
And so, and the dorm parent of OCC, the dorm I was in, was not a very kind person. He wanted us to call him Dad with his last name, and I'm not going to say it because I don't want to defame him or anything like that. But I was like, "You're not my dad. I'll never call you that." Like, because I'm a black and white logic person, and like,
and you're not my dad.
yeah, and you're not my
it's
dad.
a little weird.
So
it's a little weird.
It's so, Mr. You.
Yeah.
I will call you Mr. and that's enough. But he had this like speech the first night of like Gang of America. Men are piercing their ears and dyeing their hair and painting their fingernails, and like I'm sitting there with all of the above.
Yeah.
And so I was really confused and not really offended, but just kind of like that's rude, you know?
Right,
like
yeah.
that,
Who are you to say this to
right?
me?
Like so. Started a really good bitterness train there in Ozark, and then so alone, bitter, confused about church. Never prepared myself for college. Like I'd never written a paper before, and so like now I'm in college, and like they're like, okay, you have a 10-page paper due by the end of this semester, and like I'd never heard about a syllabus, and I'm like looking at all this crap, like I'm never gonna get done. Like
and
how?
Those are all ingredients that make for a recipe for pornography.
Yeah,
like that's,
you're like overwhelmed,
right.
extremely tired because you're doing all-nighters. You're trying to figure out who you are as a young person, and you're free from any kind of authority with your at least a parental authority, and so you're alone a lot, and so pornography really hit home hard, really just nailed me, and so I felt this call to repent to everyone. So I told my roommate, I was like, hey, dude, I'm struggling, you know, the Christian guy chat, I'm struggling with this, and he's like, oh yeah, me too. Actually, I don't think he even said that. He was like, oh man, that stinks. And that's where it ended. I was like, okay. So we had like these dorm meetings, like little dorm devos, and we had the floor one with there was 3 floors on mine. And so I told all them, hey guys, I need to confess, like I'm struggling really difficult, like in this deep hole with pornography. I need some help. Can you guys help me? And no one, like it was like crickets, and I was confused because I didn't know how to handle it. So I went to the dean of boys at the school. Actually, no, I went to a couple professors first, and I was like, hey, I need some help. I don't know how to deal with this. You know, like I know I'm being prepared for ministry, but my sin is hard to deal with, and I don't know how to get rid of. Like it's an addiction. It's not like, oh, I messed with this once or twice. Like it's a continual pattern, a habit, and whenever I get sad, happy, hungry, sleepy, like it's always on the forefront of my mind. So, and the professor's like, oh man, you're gonna have to like reach out to your dorm, some guys in your dorm. I was like, yeah, I did that. No one said anything, and like we're just too busy. Like we don't have time. So I went to the dean of boys and said, hey, I need some help. And he was like, it'd probably be best if you just left the school. And I was like, wait, what?
What? Yeah.
Like, why? And he's like, well, we can't really have that here. I was like, you're meaning to tell me I'm the only one in this school that struggles with this? I find that hard to believe. Like I know I wasn't a believer the beginning part of my life, but I know that I'm not the only one with internet access by myself. So like, tell me that I'm the only one here that struggles with this, or like, how are you preparing people at this school to deal with people in their church later on in life that deal with this? Because I feel like it's going to get more and more.
Newsflash: lots of people struggle with it.
Right? Yeah. So the
stats are out. That's not
right.
So needless to say, I was angry, hurt by the so-called church that I was a part of, or people preparing people to go to church. I didn't really have a church in Ozark because I was involved in deaf ministry, so I was going to different churches and interpreting, and that was a part of my schooling, and I had to do that. and I had a really bad breakup. A girl that I was going to propose to, and she broke up with me, and that was hard. So just
Right.
fuel to the flame, So I left. I went home and went to a factory. Second and third shift, more alone time.
Right.
Just really piling on the layers of isolation and sadness and loneliness.
And I thrive in community,
Yeah.
and I just couldn't find it. So I went back to my hometown, which I left because I felt like it was very narrow-minded and didn't have a lot of eclectic views on other people.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's grown since I've been gone. I can tell that there's definitely different cultures and different people there. But so I went back and didn't find help. It was really hard. I just continued to struggle. And it really became a point where I was just floundering, and I finally just kind of gave up, stopped trying to ask for help, because I never got it.
Right.
And so I was like, why do I ask for help? Like, why do I keep doing the same thing over and over again, asking for help, no one helps, and I'm still alone. So like, what's the point of asking anymore?
Mm-hmm.
But then it stopped. Like, I had like this season of no desire, but I didn't have a desire for anything. So it didn't matter what it was. Like,
Gotcha. Yeah.
and I was working third shift, mandatory overtime of Palooza at a factory where you do the exact same thing, monotonous for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours with people that are drones and don't care about anyone. And so I got really into a dark place. Like, this company I was working for, I literally told a woman to never speak to me ever again because I couldn't stand the sound of her voice. I was in a bad place. And then John from Deeper, that program I did right after high school, called me and was like, you don't sound right. He knew me well enough to know that even on the phone I didn't sound right. And so he goes, I want you to come down to Louisville and spend the weekend. I was like, okay. So your parents were down there Andy's parents were down there running this, like, I don't remember what it was called when they were down there. Rest Ministries.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Was it Rest Ministries down there too?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, I couldn't remember if it had a different name, but so I signed up to, like, I called them. I was like, can I come stay with you? I need like a silence and solitude retreat where like I don't have access to anything, just some spiritual care.
Right.
And they're like, yeah. And then they came around to sign us up for overtime.
Gotcha.
And I was like, yeah, I quit.
Yeah.
I don't care. I quit, and I just threw my name badge in their face and walked out, which was awesome. But
and by the way, my parents run a retreat ministry for personal and pastoral retreats and stuff, and so that's where the Rest Ministries is their thing. So that's what he's talking about.
Yeah. So went down there, quit my job. Didn't have anything in place. Like, the first time I ever quit a job without having something lined up. But went down there and spent the first day just basically just sleeping and resting. But not speaking. And then John showed up the next day and brought his guitar, and we sang, and Jonathan kind of taught me how to play guitar and sing, and just had a really good time. And then decided that I needed to move down there. Jonathan got me a job, moved to Louisville, and then went to Sojourn Community Church and got involved with Cassie at a community group. And this whole time, Jonathan kind of popped my bubble, my Christian bubble, when I first met him. So I forgot to mention that when I went to Deeper, he was listening to Dave Matthews Band one day, and I was like, how can you listen to this as a Christian? And and he went off the handle on me and who told you that if I listen to this, that doesn't make me a Christian? And really helped me understand the truth of the gospel and the freedom of the gospel, and not fences placed around the gospel. And so I'm very grateful and in debt to him for that, because, well, not to him, but yeah, you know what I mean? So went to Louisville, went to Sojourn, still very confused, still very not understanding all of the truth of the gospel. I'd never heard anything outside of just Christian, so denominations didn't make sense to me.
Sure.
And so Cassie and I started dating, and it wasn't even a week. We hung out for it's another story about us getting together, but when I actually officially asked her to be my girlfriend, it was about a week after we started talking about sovereignty of God. And we went to Sojourn, which is a Southern affiliated church, Reformed theology, and so I said something about losing my salvation because I had heard about it through the other church, the legalism church, and she was like, "Excuse me, what?" And so she almost broke up with me because I didn't. She's like, "Are you not Reformed?" I was like, "What is Reformed?" She's like, "Are you a Calvinist or Arminius?" I was like,
I don't know what you're talking about.
God bless you. Did you just sneeze? Like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And like, we went to the same church, and like, I love the teaching of the Reformed theology, but I didn't know that there was a difference. Like, I just thought, oh, this guy knows how to teach the word, and the other guy was kind of a schmuck and didn't.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, but I got introduced to like Reformed theology and started falling in love with Reformed theology and just theology in itself. Like, I didn't even know that was a thing. Like, I didn't grow up in that type of realm. Even at Ozark, I didn't learn about, but I also probably wasn't in the right place to learn about it. So they teach theology at Ozark for sure. I mean, they're sending out pastors all the time, so they have to teach something. But I was just not in the right place. So with that, Cassie and I get married. She knows all about my struggles. We get help with premarital counseling, pre-engagement counseling. I had someone intentionally every day call me, helping me through that, and went heaps of time, like over a year, with not looking at anything. It's like marriage didn't fix it. For all of you who think that marriage is going to fix your pornography addiction, it's not. The reality is your heart wants what it wants, and if you don't fill your cup with the right thing, then eventually you're going to have the storm that God talks about in I think it's Matthew. I don't remember exactly where it's at, but that storm that's coming. And if your house isn't built on the rock or if it's built on the sand, mine was still on sandy surfaces. And so when the storm came, which wasn't like this huge, like, negative thing, just something took a hold, and I got into it again. And then I had to confess to my wife, which that was great. Let me just tell you how that was terrible.
Because in comparison, I mean, so Matthew 7, by the way.
Thank you.
Just give that. It's interesting to say that because I just gave a staff devotional the other day on that, and it was the whole point was, we're talking about Jesus does not say if the storm comes,
right? It's when,
but when,
yeah,
right? But when, and so there is a sense of being grounded and prepared for when that comes. But I just have to imagine that you've already taken these steps previously to address this issue in community with other men.
Mm-hmm.
And now the shift, I'm just going to say the conversation with wife has got to be even 10 times harder.
1,000.
Yeah.
The issue is that, or actually the grace that happened was that during our dating season, I told her, I was like, here's your chance to get out.
Right.
Yeah, hey, here's my deepest, darkest secret.
Right.
If I'm going to marry you, you better know this. And
but it doesn't make it any easier, though, when you have to say, I failed at this again.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like at that time when I told her, I was pre-engagement counseling, and like I was finding victory, and it wasn't a struggle. And then all of a sudden I had to come to her and tell her again, like, hey, I gave in. And something that I haven't shared yet was that during my life with my dad my dad's a phenomenal father, just a good dude. He works hard, great example of what it takes to be a leader, or at least a leader in financially providing and taking care of his home. But he wanted to be my buddy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's played into some things in my life where, like, I have my addiction to pornography is also partnered with an addiction to same-sex attraction with older men, like my dad's age. And I want to make it very clear, like, I never want to have sex with my dad, but when I struggled, it was always with feeling like I wanted to make a connection. And so that connection was really something that I desired with older men, and it wasn't even ever a sexual thing. Even now, like today, like I desire to have wisdom shared with me and life guidance. Right. And that's better than surface level.
Yeah.
And I even told my dad recently, like, Dad, like, can we have a relationship that's past surface? Like, I want to know what you struggled with when you were growing up.
Yeah.
Like, what things did you hate, things that you loved, things that hurt your feelings. You know, like, I don't know these things about you. Like, you were a great dad. You provided for us. We always had good food, like a welcoming home, even through the divorce. You know, my dad wouldn't speak bad about my mom. You know, like, he was a great dude, and he still is. Like, but there is some kind of disconnect being his only son and not having a lot of time with him by myself that has caused me to desire that connection, which has then led me into a pornography addiction, which didn't start with even gay pornography. It was more of like, just when I was young, just intrigued, trying to figure it out. But then it eventually morphed into that because I realized there was something missing.
Sure.
And so, and having a black and white brain, logical brain, where I see data and information and numbers and rhythms and patterns, it was really hard for me to have and still is, have a relationship with God that seems real because he's not right in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people struggle with that. Like, how does this guy have such a good relationship with God? Like, I can't hear his voice and I can't see him.
Right. I mean, it's really easy to have a relationship with somebody who's right in front of you because you can have that feedback and, you know, that give and take and things like that. But yeah, that's tough.
It is. And it's still a struggle. It's still really hard. But as I worked through this, you know, like, it took, I didn't tell anyone about my same-sex attraction for a long time. I think it was right before I left Louisville. I told Jonathan, my best friend, and just like, I don't really know why I want this. And it's not like there's a specific thing. And I just listened to a podcast the other day that this guy talks about, like, men who struggle with pornography, like, really need to understand, like, what are they typing in their search bar? Because not that they want you to go search it, but like, there's something that's deeply rooted in the words you use to specifically look up something. And so, like, that's something that hit home to me. Like, what is it about that specific age group? And I don't know. So still trying to figure that out. I don't have answers for you guys. So, but, you know, I went through, when we moved, I guess a big portion of our life that I haven't mentioned yet is our time in New Zealand. We went to New Zealand as missionaries. I was a worship pastor, and I learned how to preach, which was freaking awesome. I love it. Didn't know I wanted to even learn how to do that. Started reading, like, systematic theology, which at first, if you've ever seen Wayne Grudem's systematic theology book, it's huge. It's fat. And
larger than the Bible.
Yeah. And I'm like, oh, that's intimidating. I'll never read that. You know? And then I picked it up one day and read, like, one section. It's not written like where you read it from front to back. You can read it in sections, which helped me.
Gotcha.
But during that time, we had a lot of attack on our family. And attacks always bring that desire to just escape. And so during our time in New Zealand, Cassie, when we moved there, she was 28 weeks pregnant with our second son. And we had to have an emergency C-section because our second son had the cord wrapped around his neck 3 times. And when her water broke, it, like, noosed him. And so emergency C-section, never, you know, we always had these plans of, like, natural birth, blah, 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 and don't cut the umbilical cord for, like, 30 minutes, you know, all these things that you read about. And it was, like, life or death, like, we got to get him out. And so they cut her open and get him out, and he's as blue as a ballpoint pen. And then we learned later that, like, he failed his APGAR, like, he was not breathing. But we didn't learn that till much later. So a week after he was born, we're at home, and then Cassie, like, just almost looked like she was getting ready to pass out. She's holding Thalen, and she just, like, laid her head back. She was like, I need you to take the baby. I was like, okay. And I put him down on the floor on this, like, blanket, and I'm looking at her. I was like, what's wrong? She's like, something's wrong with my heart. And I was like what? And she's like, it's beating so fast. I feel like my cell phone's vibrating in my chest. And so, like, I tried to take her pulse, and it was just, like, flying. It was just beating so fast, like a drum roll. So I call the emergency, to, you know, like 911, and told them to come to our house. And I literally thought I was going to watch her die in front of me. Like, she was blacking out, not doing well. And Liam's sitting there going, is Mommy going to die? Is Mommy going to die? And that's
terrible as a dad to have to.
And you can't do anything.
Yeah.
You're literally just sitting there like,
yeah.
hey, well, let's just sit here and I love you. Like, and then I'm like, what am I gonna do? Like all these things just like flood your head.
Yep.
They get there and they like break an ice pack, put it on her neck, and all of a sudden her heart just goes back into rhythm. But then they go to the hospital. We were there all day, and they're running tests, and they're like, well, we think you passed a blood clot through your heart and lived.
Wow.
Jeez.
So that was a little bit traumatic.
Oh boy.
Needless to say, a little bit traumatic. So when we got pregnant the third time, I went into complete panic because, like, we've always decided that we were going to just let the Lord handle how many kids he wanted us to have. We weren't going to put, like, oh, we want 2 and we're done, that kind of thing. Just let the Lord handle it. And so we got pregnant again, and Clara was, we got pregnant with Clara, and I went into freak out mode thinking, well, what's going to happen to you this time?
Yeah.
Am I going to lose you, or
Yep.
am I going to lose are we going to lose the baby? And then at 20 weeks, we found out that Clara had a cleft lip. And like I was holding Thalen and trying to hold on to Liam running around, and I'm watching the ultrasound, and I see like they go right over her face, and I see this big gaping hole, and I'm like, is that a cleft? Like I'd read about them before,
Yeah.
but I didn't know much about them. And of course the ultrasound tech was like, oh well, I'll have to send it over to the other people. They can't say
Right.
anything,
Yeah,
they're
right.
not allowed to say anything.
Right.
But like you could
know,
clearly
yeah.
see that there was this big hole. And so that was like, it took the wind out of my sails. Like, not only am I scared for my wife,
Mhm.
now my daughter's going to have, like you just don't know.
Right.
You don't know what to expect with the cleft
Well,
baby
and
because
we share that in similar because we
Yeah.
had we had a baby pass in stillbirth, and then our next one after that, same thing.
not
you know,
like 6 months after we had ours. you
right?
guys-
Yeah, and so then our youngest Hattie had a cleft lip and palate too. So it was like I remember that day too. You're like you're scared already because the pregnancy. You don't know if everything's gonna be okay in the pregnancy,
Yeah.
and then you find this out, and you're like,
Yeah. And then they're trying to tell us there was all these other like they wanted to do one of those things where like they shove a needle in and take cells
Fluid,
out.
yeah.
I don't know what it's called, but there's it's a dangerous procedure, and
Right.
they think there was other issues going on, and so I'm scared to death, not knowing what to expect. Then you read everything on the internet, which is the worst way to go, because you read all
Yeah,
the horror
people. Yeah.
don't read it.
And so we're like, oh, she's going to come out. She's not going to be able to breathe. She's not going to be able to eat. She's not going to be able to do this, and this. She might be deaf. She might be. And then, then I'm like, okay, then maybe this is why I learned sign language a long time ago, because I'm going to have a deaf baby.
Right.
So my brain starts playing all these things. And Claire's born. She's normal size, but she has a cleft. And it was a lip and palate. But it was a unilateral, which means just the one side. And it was connected still inside, just not fully.
Gotcha.
And so there's babies that are born with like no roof of their mouth and like
Yep.
completely no lip in between the two cleft sides. And so we were very fortunate. But Claire did not eat well. And so we had like this Frankenstein bottle that we made from like a Dr. Brown's and I don't remember, pigeon, and like there's all these bottles that you can get for like babies that struggle to eat to help them not take in a lot of air. All these things.
Right. Yep.
Not taking a lot of air, and because they get really bad upset stomachs because the cleft, it makes it hard for them to eat. Claire would not eat, and we literally just had to squeeze the bottle down her throat. Cassie was the only person on planet Earth that could get her to finish a bottle, and Cassie willed her to live for the first year. And so through that first year, Clara had her first surgery for her lip, and it's weird when you put your kid down for a surgery,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
it does something to you.
Yeah.
It really does something. So right before Clara was born, I forgot to mention this, Liam looks up at us and says, my throat hurts. And like I look down and like I see this ball. Like, did you swallow a bouncy ball or something? And I'm like feeling it squishy, and socialized medicine has its perks, but it also has its downfalls. And so we get Liam in. We think it's a thyroglossal cyst. Okay, we'll get you in the system. 6 months later, it's getting bigger.
Yep.
Haven't heard anything. So we call the doctor, and they're like, oh, he's not even on the schedule. And we're like, what? Like, he needs to be on the schedule. Like, and so they move us to the Wellington Hospital in New Zealand, which is the big hospital. And we go that next week and see the doctor. And he's like, okay, we need you guys to come back in 4 weeks. We'll get this thing removed. And we're like, we're having a baby in 4 weeks. Scheduled C-section, like it's
gonna happen.
It's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Like it's not like, oh, we might have a baby in 2 weeks, but no, it's like we know exactly the date. And so we Liam had to go in for surgery 2 weeks before. Like the day we went and saw the doctor, the next day it blew up. Like it was probably the size of like I don't know, a good sized bouncy ball. But then the next day it blew up to the size of like an oversized golf ball.
Oh wow.
It was huge. And it'd been in there for now 7 months. Okay, so
Jeez.
I sent pictures to him. I was like, something's got to change. We got to get this in. So he calls. He's like, someone canceled. Can you come in tomorrow? We're like, yeah. He's like, don't feed him after midnight, that whole spiel. Well, in New Zealand, kids come in. They're the first served because they're the youngest. They can't deal with,
Not
things.
eating for, yeah.
But it's still based on age. So the youngest to oldest. Well, Liam was almost 4.
Yeah.
Was he 4? I think he was 4. So he was one of the oldest. So like he hadn't eaten since midnight. We get there at 6:30 in the morning, and then it's almost 2:30 now. And like we've been sitting in
Man.
the same room all day with like books, and like he's been such a good, like he was so good, and like he didn't talk, like he was just chill. Like I was like, did you guys drug him or something?
Yeah, right.
Like, but he was so good, just sat there, and when he went back, we had to hold him, and then they put him under in our arms, and I was like, yeah, I feel like I just watched him die. Like
Yeah.
it literally
Yeah.
felt like I just
Yeah.
watched him die because he
Yeah.
just went limp, and that was not good to be a part of that situation. And then they said it's be about 2 or 3 hour surgery. Okay, 20 minutes later they come out, and I'm like, what's wrong?
Yeah.
What's wrong?
Right.
And
Yeah.
like they're like, well, it's so big that we had to clean it and remove all the junk out, and we'll have to come back to do the follow up in about 2 weeks. So like they cleaned it out and they shoved all this gauze on the inside
Oh,
of
boy.
it. It was disgusting.
yuck.
Yeah.
So when we go to the like waiting or the recovery room, there's something about recovery rooms that I don't know if it's the smell or what, but like I get really weak, like lightheaded.
Yeah.
And I'm a pale person as it is. So like I walk in and they're like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "I'm just pale." But I was like, "But I don't feel good, so I'm just gonna sit down on the ground right here." And I was like, "Can I have some water?" And like there was just something, and then they like took the
Oh.
so I'm not a medical person. Cassie loves it, but so that happened. Then we went back. He had such a big thyroglossal cyst that it rubbed a hole in his pharynx.
Oh.
So to fix his pharynx and his vocal cords and stuff like that, and it was awful. Then Claire's born with the cleft lip. Cassie's willing her to live. Thalen at that time, our second, had such a respiratory issue that we thought he had cystic fibrosis. So we're just getting attacked left and
Yeah.
right. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just left and right. Then we get pregnant again. And I was like, Lord, please let this be it, because I'm going to lose my mind. Like, I'm
Yeah.
Yeah.
going to lose it. And then they said that there's something wrong with our fourth, that there was some kind of cyst in her brain, and she had bowel loops that were backwards, and she wasn't going to make it past a certain time. And oh gosh, it was rough. And then we decided to come, like, for us to get back, we had to come back because our financial support was falling out and falling off. And then for us to apply for residency was like $8,000 for us to apply.
Wow.
But it was a big maybe because of Clara's continual care.
Gotcha.
And so we were like, let's just go home. She needs better care. And plus the speech therapy in New Zealand, that system is completely broken. She would have been 5 before she saw her first speech therapist.
Wow.
And we were like, let's go home. So we decided to go home. We told everyone we were coming home in December, and then showed up on Thanksgiving Day, and no one knew we were coming.
That's awesome.
And we kept it a big secret, and it was awesome. We made a video of it.
I remember seeing that video. It was cool.
Yeah, it was really cool, and I can even give you the link so you
Sure.
can put it in the show notes. But it was awesome just to surprise everyone. But what we didn't realize is that we had to process saying goodbye to people that we might not ever see again
Oh, yeah.
without letting anyone know back home that we were grieving,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
because they didn't know we were coming home so soon.
Gotcha.
And so we grieved silently in a way, and then got home. It was a big surprise. Everyone that helped the excitement. But then once that excitement went away, the grieving happened again.
Gotcha.
and all the follow-up of the PTSD that we got from being in New Zealand and all the attacks on our kids, and I struggled to find a job, and then we're home all the time. We're living with Cassie's mom, which I'm so thankful for her abilities to take us in, but things started coming back in, and I dove deep, and I was not in a good place. I got a job working in Lafayette, and I was in a deep place, and then I finally told Cassie's like, something's not right with you. It's like, yeah, I'm not okay. I had to tell her again that I was deep in the hole, which I felt like I kicked her right in the throat. My wife lives in a way, she's like, I'm not surprised by your sin. Like, that doesn't surprise me. What surprises me is that you didn't tell me. Like, you didn't come to me and ask for help. That's, I think, what really hurts. Plus, basically, it's like committing adultery. Like,
Right.
people don't realize that. Like, it is severe. It is a severe offense. So I went to biblical counseling for a while, and like the biblical counseling I went to Faith is like the emergency room. They really help you get through, get you bandaged up, stop the bleeding.
Sure. Yeah.
And then they're like, if you're not a member of their church, they're like, you need to go to your primary care physician.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Your own church.
Right.
And so I went to my own church and told them what was going on. I confessed everything. I don't hold anything back anymore. I just share everything. And so, which is hard for some people. They don't know how to deal with a heterosexual male that struggles with homosexual thoughts, never acting out on them, but still has them. And it's only in a very minute way. They don't know how to deal with that.
Sure.
And so it's hard. It's hard to deal with that. And then the PTSD of New Zealand really, and I know people don't like using that phrase, but we had some traumatic experience.
Sure.
And yeah, I didn't go to war and, wasn't on the front lines, but like my kids were attacked.
Yeah.
I was attacked, and ministry's hard.
Yeah.
I don't, if you're not in ministry, you have no room to say that it's not, because it is hard. You're getting attacked by the evil ones all the time. So pray for your leaders, because they need them. The Lord is kind and has brought me into a better place in the last year. I go to a church called City of God in Lafayette. It's 10 years old. We're about, I would say, probably 900 strong when college is in session. Then when college is not in session, we're about maybe less than 400 people. And we set up and tear down every Sunday and at a school, which we're very thankful for. But
set up and tear down is terrible.
And it would be really nice to get our own place. We're really looking forward to looking for that someday. But I'm a part of the North American Mission Board has this program called the Pipeline, and our leadership is taking our leaders, and I'm a city group leader and worship leader and whatever needs to be done person, like I just kind of fit wherever needs. And they're taking us through that. And the first year is just about leadership and learning, how to read the Bible, that kind of thing, and leadership. And then the last 2 years prepares people to become like elders or pastors or missionaries or church planners. And so I signed up for the 3 years and plan on being there, doing that for the next 3 years, and then see where the Lord takes us from there. But yeah, it's a journey. It is not like it never goes away. That's the one thing about, if you don't have an addiction to pornography or an addiction in general, it's really hard to fathom that it's always on your mind.
Sure.
So if you're addicted to shopping, you're always thinking about buying something. If you're addicted to heroin, you're thinking about your next fix. And it doesn't matter if you're happy or you're sad or you're fiending for something. And unfortunately for me, it's pornography addiction. I just have an addictive personality. If I like something, I like it.
Yeah,
like coffee,
you're all in.
I'm all in. Like I learn every gram measurement and hot water temperature and coffee that I can. That's kind of some of my hobbies, but yeah, I don't know. That's a gist. That's a long gist, but that's me.
So what would you say, like, for our listeners who may be struggling with either a pornography addiction or just any other addiction in general, but specifically let's talk about pornography addiction because that's something that you're dealing with here. What would you say would be some action items that they could take to help get out of that?
I don't have a special formula,
Right.
but I do know that.
Well, and everyone's going to be different.
Right,
too.
right. But I do know that community is the biggest thing.
Mhm.
Transparency. I think the hardest thing for like when you get a group of guys together, first kind of group of guys time together with new dudes, assume that someone there is looking at pornography. And so if you're not willing to talk about your own struggle, neither are they.
Yeah.
And so like I'm always the first person like, hey guys, I have an addiction to pornography, so I need you to know that. So like if I call out, I have this thing that I learned during biblical counseling. I have stages. So like stage 1 is like saw something and it triggered me to think about something, and I just need you to start praying for me. Stage 2 is like, hey, I'm really feeling the pull, and stage 2 can be the optimum stage for you to call someone and say, I need some help, pray for me, let's meet up for coffee, flee from wherever you're at, turn off your internet, throw it out the window, I don't care what you have to do. Stage 3 is you're planning. Like you've already committed it almost. You're planning, you're scheming, you're trying to figure out when people aren't going to be around. And stage 4 is you've completed the whole thing. So find some dudes. This is not a dude problem only. This is definitely a female problem as well, especially prevalent in this day and age with cell phones the way they are. Kids are exposed to pornography by age 7, even earlier I think now. But so for a dad, I don't let my kids go around when other kids have cell phones.
Yeah.
I don't. I'm like, hey, you can't be inside. Like, you guys have to play outside. And if they have a cell phone, I'm like, hey, you need to put your cell phone away. Like, if they come over to our house, like, you can't use your cell phone here unless you're calling your parents. Because some kids, neighbor kids come over and they have, like, unlimited access to whatever they want on the internet on a phone. And I'm like, nope, not allowed. So do know that exposure is a lot higher. And but for dudes specifically struggling with this or girls struggling with this, find people to be transparent with. Let them know.
Yeah.
It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. It sucks to have to tell someone that you're struggling with something, because sexual sin, I think people put on a higher pedestal than like gluttony or materialism. They think it's worse, which is a lie from the pit of hell.
Right.
But the reality is that we see those things as different. And so you need to be transparent. The more clear and the more transparent you are about specifics, the better care you can receive.
Sure.
So if you're vague, like, hey guys, I struggled looking at pornography last week once, it was midnight, blah, blah, blah. But if you're like, hey, I looked at pornography like 5 times this week, and every time I went, I looked at this specific thing. That gets hard to say. One, that's really hard to say. But then, because then you have to completely be transparent about what you're looking for. And if you have guys mature enough in your group that can help walk through it, then you have a chance of getting some actual help, present help in front of you. The Lord and the Holy Spirit do things. They definitely work to help you through that. But I definitely think that God sends people into your life to help you for specific reasons. And so really searching out, like I said, what are you typing in? Be clear about that. I don't think it's always best to have your wife or your spouse as your accountability partner. Not that they shouldn't know,
but to hold you accountable.
To hold you accountable, to talk about on a regular basis. I think it really is better to have someone that is of the same sex, first of all, that will help you through it. Because there's a point where they're going to say, you need to tell your wife. If it's to the point where you're not changing, you're not repenting, and you're not getting out of it, then you need to bring your wife, and they're going to tell you. They should tell you. Your wife needs to get involved, because that makes it real. Yeah, that makes it hard. And dudes that don't have wives, that young guys that listen to this podcast, find older men, find guys that are married, that you can confide in. Because I think, what was that Dustin guy? Dustin Carr talked about like these kids are trying to confide in someone their same age. Do you remember that? And it was like they're psychologically in the same place, and they're like, how are you going to give wisdom when you are in the same area? So like, find older people, guys that are going to be able to give you wisdom. And it doesn't have to be a pastor. Like, it can be someone in your church. It can be someone that you see, you can ask and just say, hey, I need someone. You're the closest person I know. Can you be my wall?
Yeah.
That was the other thing we talked about in
Yeah.
that podcast, the wall thing. Like, can you be that person for me that I can call at 3:00 in the morning when I'm struggling?
Right.
I just went to college, like young college guys go to college. They have freedom to do whatever they want. They need it.
Yeah.
Guys that are going to college that leave this church or leave a church that you're a part of, you need to be in contact with them.
Yeah.
Because they're going to go into a world where they don't want to call their parents and say, hey,
Right. I'm
struggling with this.
Well,
Like,
and where certain behaviors will be maybe even celebrated or
Surreal.
condoned, and that's the other thing that I think about. I think so often. So, Andy and I, we have the constant conversation on show, off show, all of that. My wife, and I'll own this. My wife, has this conversation with me the other day. Like, so our eldest son just turned 10 in November, and like he's like not 5 anymore, and you just wake up one day and you realize like he's the age of the first time. He's the same age the first time that I encountered, like, hey, friend found the magazine in the parking lot,
Right.
and oh, hey, and on top of that, the other thing, I'm not trying to disparage after school transportation, but the bus ride home is like the den of iniquity because we've got and this is Jackie and I talk about this all the time. My son being in 4th grade, there are 5th graders with cell phones on the bus
that can have access to what they want.
And I'm just like, that is like the prevailing thought. I'm not trying to be fearful or like live in this like paranoia, but like I know boys.
Yeah.
And
it's
I know
our responsibility.
Yeah,
It's
and
like,
it's
Right.
and that's the thing. So when like my kids are asking like, when do I get a cell phone or whatever, like we always have these conversations, and I'm just like, I'm really trying to weigh, risk reward in all of this, but like I wonder from your perspective, it's like, even as you're raising, so you've got a son who's 9, coming into this, and you're like, they're not little anymore, and I know the first age of exposure to these sort of things is knocking on the door.
Yeah.
How have you guys, like, because my guess would be that you have had like, we need a game plan, and I am like sure as heck going to do everything that I can do within my power. There's a ton of other variables out there, and this is where we have to like entrust our children to God ultimately, because I can't be with them every
time.
I can't be with them every second. I can't screen every single friend. I'd like to.
But for real.
But what has been your guys' game plan to the best of your ability to say, like, we want a house that is that we're doing the best to protect our kids from this sort of thing, these kind of attacks, and what is ultimately becomes a malformation of how they understand themselves, their bodies.
Yeah.
I mean, they're learning about sexuality either overtly or covertly now.
Yeah.
So, what's been the discussion?
Discussion is age appropriate discussions about puberty. Boys go through different stages. Waking up with a morning erection is something that happens, and that can start early as 6 to like you can start early. And
that was the first awkward conversation with my wife, where she's like, "Is this normal?"
Yeah, and like you literally like we don't sugarcoat things.
Right.
This is how we do it. Some other parents don't like it, but we never call private parts anything but what their actual names are.
Yep.
And it's just like anatomy in a sense. And then as they get older, we start talking about, like, my 9-year-old. Well, first of all, we homeschool.
Yep.
My oldest son has sensory processing disorder, and so we didn't want to send our kids to public school because we feel like they would just be eaten alive.
Sure.
And so, especially where we're at, so we decided to homeschool. So that puts a level of protection.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also put strict boundaries. Like, we don't do sleepovers.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I was a kid, I went to my friend's house and slept over, but that's when I got into things.
Right.
And so we don't have sleepovers. We don't let people come and sleep over at our house. It's just too dangerous. You know what I mean? I just, so we, our kids sleep in the same room.
Mm-hmm.
No one has a cell phone.
Mm-hmm.
Cassie and I have a cell phone, but cell phones are going to be something that they will get when they get a car.
Mm-hmm.
And they have to pay for it themselves, so they can be in contact with us whenever they leave and stuff like that. And I think by the time my kids start driving, there's going to be things in cars which will shut off cell phones.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you can use a GPS and that's it. Like, you can't even play music on them. I'm hoping.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what I need to design. But I think that the level of protection is like, I just gave Liam access to the computer. Like his own personal account on our Mac, and he can sign in, and all he can use is like the notepad.
Yeah.
And I write sentences on it, and I'm like, copy that, figure, because I want him to learn how to type.
Right.
And he loves coding.
Mm-hmm.
He did a coding 4-H thing,
Yeah.
and he loves it. Like, I really think he's gonna, like, that's just how his brain's formatted. But open, honest conversations. We don't sugarcoat. When the first time one of them asked about how babies get here,
Yes.
we did the explanation of how a baby is born.
Yes.
And they were all disgusted. And but we just like it's a normal thing.
Yeah.
Cassie and I are affectionate in front of them.
Yep.
We both believe that my role is to teach my daughters what to look for in a husband.
Yep.
And teach my sons how to be a husband. And then Cassie's role is to teach our sons what to look for in a wife, and to teach our daughters how to be a wife or how to be a, significant other. So that's the stance we take. We're not perfect at it. We have 4 kids, and there's days we're like, it's 6 o'clock, go to bed. We need you to go upstairs and get away. Cause there's 4 of them. We get ganged up on a lot. But no, like, our kids are, we want to protect them as much as we can, but there is a time, they go to cousin's house.
Yep.
Cousins have cell phones.
Yep.
I think that family is where it starts, usually with cousins, to be honest, especially in like our group that's homeschooled and blah, blah, blah. I think that's where they'll get exposure, because not everyone's homeschooled.
Right.
Our 7-year-old or 8, I think he just turned 9. Our 9-year-old neighbor, he goes to the public school, and I hear them talking.
Yeah.
Like, I know.
Kids forget that you're there.
Yeah.
And they say things, and you're like,
yeah,
watch out for that one.
Yeah. And like, they're online gaming and stuff like that. And I know, there's just a lot of stuff. So, and people think we're really strict, but like they'll ask, like, they'll try to hand my kid a phone to play a game. I'm like, no.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want my kids to play with the phone. One, because they all have addictive personalities like me. And so as soon as they play, they're like, they get ticked off when you take it away, and they cry. And
it's like Coke.
It really is.
It's like that's the thing. Like, we had this morning. Thank goodness my wife woke up in time, because I had my alarm set for this morning to get up and get going. My phone's missing this morning, off my nightstand. And I'm like, oh no, and I'm not gonna shame whichever child it was, but I immediately get up and go down, and it's like we've had this conversation so many times. Don't touch my phone. If there's been every once in a while, it's like, hey, I need you to sit next to me right here, and I have to talk with the doctor for the next 10 minutes, and sit here. Here's this game. I do that on the occasion, but the thing is that, like, as soon as you go there, then it it's just super, like, downhill from there on out, and it's something that we're, like, now feeling like we have to battle all the time. But
taking steps backwards.
Yeah, like okay, we need to reel this back in. But like, already, like, there is this thing of this need that they feel for this sort of stuff, where Jackie and I all the time. I don't know how many times a day I say, "Go read, go
Yeah.
go read, please go read." But Daddy, I can't go picture books. I just
whatever,
not the device, not the thing. But we just, and Cody, what I really just hear you saying is like, and the thing I want to say is this naivety needs to get dealt with, especially in conservative Christian culture and all of this. Like, you just sort of say, like, we just give it to the Lord's hands. It's like, the Lord has entrusted you, people.
It's your job.
It's your job.
Right. Yeah.
And in this society of quick access to all things and all of that, it's like, guys, it's not us being legalistic or unfair. Like, we are naturally, especially as we're following after Jesus, we're gonna look different. And looking different right now in the 21st century in 2020, I think has something to do with engagement with technology, how we're thinking about these boundaries and things like that. So as boldly as I can say it, parents, don't be stupid.
Right.
Just quit being stupid about it.
Yeah.
And then secondly, speak directly to things.
Yeah.
Speak as they are. And I affirm, Jackie and I, when we've been talking about like, when we talk about anatomy, when we talk about anything, like, it's like we call the things that we call the things that we call them. And this is why I'll give you a quick story as to why we do this. So we have people we know. One family refers to boys' private parts as his beeper, right? I know, odd thing to call it, right? In the other family, these families know each other. The beeper is the nose. Okay, so now we've set up for perfect confusion already.
right?
So family 1 goes over to family 2's house. Family 2 says, "I'm going to get your beeper," and this family 1's child is horrified, is terrified, whatever. And it's like, you know what? We could have just called it the thing it's supposed to be called, and and that's the like trying to cutesy it up or whatever. Like, I get that, like where that comes from, and in the early age of innocence, but in general, like taking a heads-on approach to this, because by the way, the rest of the world is taking a super heads-on approach to this. They are being, those forces are being super intentional and super direct and using very descriptive language about it.
Yeah.
You being vague and sort of cloak and dagger about it on your end is not.
It's not going to help.
Not helping.
Yeah, it's not helping.
And so that's the thing. I mean, my fellow dudes, my fellow dads, parents, loved ones, anyone who's listening, this is the thing. This is why Andy and I. This is why everyone around this table. I think some of the conclusions that we have come to is we try, and it's awkward sometimes, but to be as direct as we can.
Yeah.
And to say things the way they are. And sometimes maybe you need help. Now, and I don't know if you guys have used, like, right now I got a few books, like talking to your children, Christian perspective on talking to your children about these things and then approaching it from an age-based thing. So like when they're this old, this is the conversation. They're this old, this is the conversation. Is there many resources that you guys have found helpful or?
No. No. I mean, my wife is a researcher like crazy. She stays up. She sleeps like maybe 3 hours a night because she's just a night owl. But she doesn't need a lot of sleep, so she'll read and read and read. And I mean, she has a master's in theology.
Yeah.
Master's of divinity, whatever that means. But,
yes.
She's real smart. I know that. And so we don't use a specific book.
Mm-hmm.
We just talk about reality. We just talk like it's real,
right? Because
it is. And we're strict. We're really strict about our kids having access to anything.
Yep.
And parents today have way better chances of putting blocks on things. Even on your smart TV, you can say this TV can't run any of these things after 9 o'clock at night.
Mm-hmm.
Because the reality is kids are sneaky.
Yes.
My youngest daughter is a ninja. Like she can get anywhere. I really think that she's going to be an assassin someday because she's so stealthy. But, like I can, the account I set up on the iMac cannot be used after 8 o'clock until 7 o'clock in the morning.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So Liam knows the password. I know the password too. He
Yep.
doesn't know how to change the password, but he can't change the password. Cell phones, there's so many restrictions you can put on it. Like
Yep.
literally, there's programs on the cell phones like Covenant Eyes or Triple X Church or all kinds of things that you
Yep.
can use. The thing I think that parents sometimes struggle with that I've heard is that they believe their kid's a good kid.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And the reality is that we are all sinners and suck, and we choose sin more than we choose right. And so don't believe that your kid's going to always choose the right thing.
Yeah.
Now, you can instill some really good things into them so when it's presented, they can go, guys, this isn't right. We shouldn't do this. And then
Mhm.
they'll come to you and
Yeah.
they'll tell you, like, hey, this is something happened. Just wanted to let you know. And, like, I did look, but I didn't feel right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I didn't feel right looking. I think that I don't know what that is. I don't know how to make that happen, but I've heard of stories of that happening.
Yep.
Because parents talk about how scary, how these things can happen. And so, and our kids they're just different. Our
Yep.
kids are everyone's kids are different. And we all love our children. We want the best for our children.
Yep.
And so your way of parenting, my way of parenting is for the best for our kids. We want the best. So yeah.
Well, we want to thank you for being on the show today.
Yeah, man.
It's been an amazing show. we appreciate you coming here and driving all the way here
Yeah,
and making us
thanks.
coffee and being on the show.
Yeah.
But we are not going to let you go without.
Now it's time for the Dudes and Dads Pop Quiz.
Yes.
So those who have never heard,
Yes.
the pop quiz is when we ask Cody questions that he doesn't know we're going to ask him just right off the top of our head, just random ones. So
Beautiful.
5 or so questions.
Ready.
So
Yes.
Joel, go ahead.
All right. Cody, favorite emo band?
Dashboard Confessional.
Excellent answer.
That's a good one. All right. I should have thought of some questions first. This is bad. I'm gonna go with the traditional, outside of coffee. What is your favorite drink? Coke or Pepsi, or neither? It can be neither.
Diet Dr. Pepper.
Okay. All
It tastes more like regular Dr. Pepper.
right.
Favorite hobby?
I love playing music.
Yes.
So I also like to work on my own car. I'm not a mechanic, but I like to try to figure things out.
God
Yes.
bless you.
Where was the first place that you and Cassie went on a date?
The name of the place I don't remember, but it was like a Mediterranean place with like pita and hummus and stuff like that. It's in Louisville.
Gotcha. Okay.
Let's see. Favorite love song?
I don't know if this is a love song, but I love the song. I like the way you work it.
Yeah.
Hey, I mean,
No diggity, no doubt.
we'll just
Love
be
it.
honest. That when Joel asked me that our very first episode, I said, "Pour some sugar on me,"
Yes.
and I'm like, "It's not a love song, but it's the first thing that came to my
It
mind."
feels
Yeah.
it's very intimate. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you could travel anywhere in the world that you have not traveled already, because you've obviously gotten
been a
around
lot
little
of
bit,
places.
You've
yes.
gotten around.
Where would you go? That's my last question, Joel. What's your after this?
I think that it's twofold. I'm starting to learn a lot about my heritage, and a lot of my heritage comes from Scotland and Ireland. So I'd really like to go to that region of the world.
All right, and Joel. Last question.
Last question is, what was the first vehicle that you ever owned?
This is my favorite vehicle too. Puke yellow.
Yep.
1991 Cadillac sedan.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's not everybody that gets a Cadillac.
Yeah, it was my
to
parents'
start off.
hand-me-down car, but I had two 12s with a 600-watt Jensen amp,
Nice.
and I made that thing thump. It was so good. I love that. And then I bought my own little pickup truck right after that. So.
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, we want to thank you guys for being on the show, and we want to thank you guys for listening and making the Dudes and Dads podcast what it is today. Joel, if we have feedback, we'd love to hear that from you. You can call our voicemail.
Yep, that's right. Good old voicemail line at 574-213-8702. And you can also email us over at dudesanddadspodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear some feedback from you on this episode in particular. So don't
Absolutely.
be shy.
Yep. So thanks for joining us again today, guys. Have a great day.
Grace and peace.